wanted to introduce Mayor Keeler here to give some opening remarks, but as you all just heard, we are recording this meeting again for being able to share. For those of you who aren't able to watch it tonight or listen live, it will be posted on our website, along with a lot of information that we've continued to update from our last meeting as well. But before I go in too far, Mayor Keeler would like to say some opening remarks.
Yes, thanks, Sean. I also want to thank everybody else who is joining us here tonight. As Sean mentioned, this is second in a series of virtual public information meetings to discuss the Norlite issue. Particularly want to thank Commissioner Sagos and his team at DEC, certainly including Sean and others. And just point out that for decades, really, folks in Cohoes and the surrounding areas have been concerned about the health and environmental impacts of the burning of hazardous waste at the Norlite facility and with the blasting associated with their shale mining operation. And I started looking into these issues back in January. I took office January 1st, and by the middle of January, I had been talking with staff and Congressman Tonko regarding the environmental justice issue of Norlite hazardous material incineration, as well as the blasting and the issues related to the mining, such as the dust control issues. But by mid-February, the AFFF issue came to our attention, and that kind of became really a front burner thing for the administration. And I'm grateful that just last month, Governor Cuomo signed into law the President McDonald bill that effectively banned the incineration of AFFF at Norlite, but there's still more to be done, and we've learned a lot since January. We've made progress, and teaming up with DEC, I look forward to more progress regarding Norlite. And that's why I've asked DEC to host these public meetings. And I don't have a full list of the attendees, but if John McDonald or Neil Breslin is on, I would just like to again acknowledge them and ask them if they'd like to say anything.
Thanks, Mayor. Look quick, I didn't see either of them on, but okay. If they are and they're logged on by phone, if they hit *3, you can raise your hands, and we can obviously unmute your lines. If you're on via the WebEx, please raise your hand, and we can make sure you're unmuted to say a few words, Senator and Assemblyman.
Okay, again, thank you all for participating tonight. I look forward to hearing what everybody has to say. Sean, thanks. Cheers again.
We do have one raised hand, so I'm going to unmute the raised hand.
Thanks, Regina.
Oh. You're on right now.
Is that Senator Breslin or Assemblyman McDonald?
Oh, I think they muted themselves.
Okay.
They went away. Sorry.
Well, Mayor, thank you again for joining us tonight. And obviously, like we said, we're deeply committed to your community and keeping this conversation going, and glad to have you an active part in these conversations. And once again, and Regina, if you want to go to the next slide, this is what we call a virtual public information session. Obviously, if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, we'd be preferring to have this conversation directly with you in the Cohoes community, but we're glad that so many of you can join us here virtually tonight. And again, as I introduced a little bit before, one of the key items that we want to talk about tonight is providing a status update on the comprehensive performance test. As we talked about in the last public meeting, and some additional correspondence that went out subsequent to that, we know there are still some questions about the CPT, what happened, what we looked at, and where things are going. And we've got Ben Potter on with us tonight, who's our regional air engineer, who will walk you through the comprehensive performance test. And then after that, We know that there were many questions regarding the mining operation part of the Norlite facility, and we have Sam Wyckoff here with us tonight, who's going to go in and provide some more information on our approach to overseeing the mining aspects of the Norlite operations. In between each of those presentations, we will pause for questions on topics related to what the presenters spoke about, and then we'll also have a time at the end for more questions as well, and keep the conversation going. And again, Regina went into it before, and if you could go to the next slide, Regina. You can ask questions in the chat as presenters are presenting. We did obviously appreciate a number of the email questions that we received in advance, and we have tailored some of the presentations tonight to address those. But obviously, if you don't hear your specific question asked, feel free to ask it in the chat. But also, please feel free to check back our website repeatedly. We are continuing to update information regularly on there, including FAQs from the last meeting that we've addressed, and we're going to continue to put information available online as well. So please don't hesitate to check online, and throughout the course of the evening tonight, ask whatever questions you may have. And again, to do so, if you're an attendee on the WebEx watching, there's a hand raise function on the bottom of your screen here, and we will unmute your line to ask a question. If you are on the phone, when we open it up for phone line questions, hitting *3 on your phone will allow you to raise your hand, and we will unmute your line from there and allow you to ask your question. So again, tonight, this is a public information session. It is not a public hearing. Our experts are here to provide you information on DEC's oversight of this facility, and again, answer any questions that you have. So Gina, if you could go ahead to the next slide. I'd like to introduce Ben Potter, who was with us at our last meeting, but again, is one of our key air experts in the region here that's overseeing this facility and obviously many others as well. And Ben, why don't you welcome and give us a walk through the comprehensive performance test.
Hey, great. Thanks for the introduction, Sean. Tonight, I'm going to recap a little bit and talk about what we've been doing, what DEC has been doing regarding the comprehensive performance tests of the lightweight aggregate kilns at Norlite. And also I'll talk about some complaint response that we've done in the last few weeks since I last talked. So let's move to the first slide. The comprehensive performance test that was just performed is demonstrating compliance with the emission standards required by EPA. EPA's rule gives us all our allowable emissions, and that's what we determine on this stack test. It took place over 6 days, and so I'm going to go over what we saw while we were there and what we expect to happen moving forward. So next slide. This slide is talking about what we actually tested for. So these are the emission standards that are allowed by EPA. So these are the things we look for. On the left side of this slide, it's kind of wordy, but I'm going to walk through this. We have the destruction and removal efficiency, which is what most people are interested in. These are a lot of the questions that are coming in. That's dependent on how hot the kiln operates and how much of the pollutants that are being burnt are destroyed. You can see the limit in the center is 99.99%. So that's what we look for. The results of this test need to show those limits that are in that center column in order to be in compliance with state and federal regulations and for them to continue operation in burning hazardous waste. The next column would be dioxin and furans. I went into this on the last presentation a little bit, and the standard is also there. So the other things we test for, all of these are required by EPA and by that regulation that Norlite is applicable to. So these are things we look for. So total chlorine, mercury, semi-volatile metals, low volatile metals, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and particulate matter. In this presentation that I'm going to get a little bit also involved more into the particulate matter, because that is where some of our complaints have been coming through, is with soot complaints being deposited or dust. So EPA has set the limit at 0.025 grains per dry standard cubic foot. That is not a level that you can see with your eye. Just looking at something, you're not going to be able to see that. So with the apparatus that I'm going to show you in this presentation, you can see how we actually look for that, how we look for that in a test and what is evaluated to get that number, to see if it's met. So you can move forward. Next slide. So oversight during this test, it was for a total of 6 days in duration between the two kilns, and DEC staff were there the entire time. So the test execution, we ensured compliance with every piece of that. So we had the protocol that came in first that was approved, and we made sure that that was met. Everything that was in the protocol that was approved, we made sure that was being done during the test. As I said, there were 4 DEC staff on site during most of the testing, and at least one of us, if not 2 of us, were there for every second of the testing. We had direct observation of the emissions sampling on the stacks, the sample recovery when you brought the pieces of the equipment down off the stacks, how they recover that to make sure what's in it. We were there for all of that. And during that, we also had direct access to the control room to look at the parameters that the system was operating at. So we could see temperatures throughout the air pollution control system. We could see the burn end of the kilns. We could see the temperatures in there. We could see every aspect of the facility and how it was operating. We had free access to walk the entire site on our own. So I could be walking on the site, which I was, for several hours each of those days, just looking at different parts of the site to make sure it was operating correctly. And that I could go wherever I wanted. So everything that had to do with this test, one of us was there watching this. So you can go to the next slide. The testing schedule, I think I said on the last presentation that it was going to be 3 days of testing. The way it worked out was there's so much involved with the testing of these kilns, and there's so many people involved between the state, the third-party testers, and Norlite operating. The kilns were tested separately to make sure we could have complete oversight of that testing. So kiln 2 was the first kiln that was tested. That began on November 10th and ended on November 12th. There was 2 test conditions that were tested, and there was 3 sample runs in each of those conditions. So the first testing condition, we tested for dioxin and furans, and we looked for that DRE, that's the destruction removal efficiency that I just discussed in the last few slides. In the testing condition 2, we looked for the metals, particulate matter, and HCl and chlorine. In kiln 1, that was the following week, that began on November 16th and ended on November 18th. Something to add to this slide, while kiln 2 was being tested burning hazardous waste or LGF, kiln 1 was still operating, burning waste fuel. So that was still operating and burning, that was heating up aggregate, and they were still producing everything they would have been producing in that kiln while we were testing the first one. They're 2 very independent systems. The air pollution control pieces are not connected, and the kilns are not connected. They're very separate. So we could see them both operating at the same time, one burning waste fuel, which it can always burn, and one burning the hazardous waste. And as I said, both kilns had 6 sampling runs, which we were there for each of them. And you can go to the next slide. These are pictures that I took during the sampling runs. So this is just an example of the equipment that we use. The one on the left is used for DRE and hydrocarbon testing, and the sample train on the left, that's what the setups look like. So each of those glass pieces that you see in the front, those are what are pulling through the stack. So there's like a pump, and we pull the exhaust emissions from the stack through those at a constant rate, so we know exactly what's coming out of that test. So everything in these pieces of sampling equipment are recovered at the end of the test, and that's how the test is done. We look at what is captured in this. So you can go to the next test, or the next slide. And I also briefly mentioned that we had full access to the site. And on the last presentation, the main point of this test is to produce operational parameter limits that Norlite has to run at in order to ensure compliance with emission standards. So the test will show what we get out of that sampling equipment that was in the prior slide, and we get the results of what was in there. And it shows compliance with the emission limits that was in the first few slides. We then have to operate or ensure operation at the parameter limits that Norlite showed us during the test. So those are on this slide. You have the feed rate of hazardous waste, atomization pressure, which is how that waste feed is going into the kiln, shale production rate, how much shale is being fed into that kiln, temperatures throughout the entire system, and the feed rates of metals, the feed rates of the chlorine, and the overall feed rate of the hazardous waste. So these are all things that were determined on the protocol and things that we ensured during the test that they were at a max rate. So the test, all these feed rates were put at the worst case scenario. So they're the highest metal feed rates that they can ever have, the highest chlorine feed rates they can ever have, and the highest hazardous waste. And why that's done is to ensure that the emission rate or the emission limits can be met at those worst case scenarios. So normal operation, they don't operate at the worst case conditions all the time. This is to ensure that if they reach these, that they would be in compliance. And if they exceed them, we can then look at the permit to make sure there are any excess of these rates. These are all permit conditions. And also there are other operational limits, such as the baghouse operation that we can look at. If there is a baghouse leak, meaning one of the bags rip and there's particulate that goes through it, there's a baghouse leak detection. So we can also, DEC can be there at any time monitoring all those parameters. We can look at it, we can see it, and we can know that it's operating correctly. So you can go to the next slide. This is the control room that I was talking about. DEC has complete access to this. Our on-site monitor can be in here at any time of the day or night whenever he is on site. If I am on site or one of the air inspectors that I send there they can go into this control room to look at parameters at any time. Both kilns are being monitored for every parameter that I just listed in the previous slide, and then several others. So at all times, they know how the kilns are operating. They also have, you can see in the videos in the center of the left and right pictures, those are what the flame zones look like. They can see that to make sure the flame is operating in there correctly. And then they can also see the exit of the shale and inlets. They can see everything at all times. And DEC can also be there to see all these whenever we want to go in there. So you can go to the next slide. The CPT results, they're due within 90 days of the completion of these tests. So I gave the dates prior, so 90 days from the completion of each of those kilns, the notice of compliance has to be in. So what that means is once notice of compliance comes in, that would be demonstrating to DEC that they can operate within those operational parameter limits and meet the emission standards that they're applicable to. And they'll be in compliance with all of those standards and regulations in the permit. We expect that notice of compliance much sooner than 90 days. And when we get that, that will be public knowledge and that will be posted. And until that date, until they do submit the notice of compliance, Norlite has full capability of burning natural gas in their kilns. They can also burn waste fuel in their kilns. And they have a certain number of hours that they can burn hazardous waste in their kilns up until this notice of compliance is received by EPA and DEC. And you can move to the next slide. The other part of the presentation that I wanted to talk about is DEC's response to complaints that have been received. And some of these complaints that we have looked into would be ones of soot depositing from the stacks onto the Saratoga site's property. We've had complaints of odors of chemicals and burning odors. We've had complaints of dust depositing on the cars. We've responded to all the complaints received as timely as possible. And site operations observed for the soot emissions specifically and odor, we ended up being there on the same days that sometimes within hours of the complaints. What we inspected were the aggregate processing. We observed the stacks on the kilns, and we are looking into and observing compliance with the fugitive dust plan. And we continue these investigations as we receive complaints. We're looking into everything that is coming in. Next slide. On these inspections, as I said, the stacks were observed on several occurrences. Opacity was never observed from either of the stacks. And I'm going to explain that because it's very confusing. What can be seen at Norlite is a steam plume. And you can tell that it's a steam plume by how it dissipates. If it was a smoke plume, you can differentiate by the way the smoke will linger in the air. You'll see it trailing farther off, and smoke, which is particulate and fine ash that would be suspended, it doesn't go away. The plumes that are at Norlite dissipate rather quickly. They're not trailing off into long distances. Odors were not observed off-site that we could relate directly to Norlite. So we have been to several odor complaints, and we will continue to go to those until we can actually relate it to something if it's related to Norlite. In one of the complaints, we had soot. The complaint was of soot falling on Saratoga sites. So on that response, which was on November 24th, we took several samples across all of Saratoga sites, and those are currently being analyzed to see if it is soot, or if it's not. If we determine that it's not exactly soot, we'll try to figure out what it is, and then we'll try to find exactly where it is coming from. If it's coming from Norlite, we want to know what process is that coming from. The stack test, the CPT that was just done, something that I mentioned before, is we're looking at particulate, and we're looking at 0.025 grains per dry standard cubic foot. So if you don't see that in the results of that CPT, you can be assured that it's not soot coming out of those stacks. I'm not saying it's not something else, but that's what we're looking into. What exactly is this? What exactly are we seeing coming off the site, and what process can we look at to fix? So what we're doing right now is we're doing a full assessment of the fugitive dust control plan. We're working on this with a monitor on site and other staff, so air staff will be looking into this, and potentially mining staff. And we're going to evaluate the effectiveness of the fugitive dust control plan that is there right now, and we're going to find if it needs any changes. This will go hand in hand with all other plans and the whole permit application review process that's underway right now. The fugitive dust control plan is part of the Title V, so as we're treating that as a new and we're looking at everything again, we're going to make sure that the fugitive dust control plan is effective and up to date. So with these complaints that we're receiving, it lets us take a finer look at what the problems could be, and we can adjust this to make sure we don't have problems. And go to the next slide. Now, I'm still talking about the particulate in the stacks. I wanted to bring this up because as I was on those stacks and as I was looking at all the sampling equipment, I took these pictures so I could give this out to the public so you can see the same thing that I saw while I was on the stack test. The filters on the top picture these are the filters that are in line during the sampling. So emissions in the stack are being pulled through that equipment at a constant rate. We monitor that way. We know that it's being pulled through there. If it wasn't, we wouldn't allow them to continue with the stack test. So in line with the sampling equipment are these filters. This is part of the particulate test. So you can see on the filter on the left, that is the filter that was that's one of the filters that was in that sampling equipment for a full 2 hours. So that had emissions from the stack pulling through it for 2 hours. The filter paper on the right is the blank. So you have a blank, and then you have the one that's in the actual sample to see what the difference is between the two. The lighting in the trailer wasn't the best, but what I'm trying to represent here is there was no staining on these filters. The test will actually be demonstrating what the weight difference is, and we're looking at a tiny amount of weight. If it changes at all, we can tell. And that with the other glass pieces, you can tell what particulate was. But this is just how I'm demonstrating that of what's coming out of the stack. There's no black, there's no gray. The filter's still white. So to the best of our knowledge, soot is not coming out of the stacks. You would see it right here in this filter. You can have a passing filter that has visible staining all over it, and that would still meet the 0.025 grains per dry standard cubic foot. And you still wouldn't see it by your naked eye looking at that stack. The picture on the bottom is representative of what you see in that sample train that's pulling off the stack. Everything in those trains where we're pulling those emissions through is sealed. You have to do a leak check on the whole system to make sure there's no leaks or intrusion of other air other than what's coming out of the stack. So I wanted to put that in there so you can see what it looks like, that it's completely sealed, and that the only thing going through these is emissions from the stack. I also added that in 2017, the CPT resulted in 0.0121 grains per dry standard cubic foot. That's less than half of what is allowed to be coming out of those stacks. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there so that what we're looking at is more than likely not coming out of the stacks, and that will be further proved by the results of the sampling that we'll get back on the notice of compliance and the results of the CPT. And you can move forward. I guess that was it. So I am free to answer any questions that you have about the CPT, about dust or soot complaints, whatever.
Thank you, Ben. We do have some questions coming in, and we'll open it up for verbal questions to those on the phones momentarily. Just a couple quick level-setting ones. Back on the filters, what size filters were those?
Those are the filter size is specified by the method. I'd have to look back at the method, but they're about probably 3.5 inches.
Okay.
They're standard. You have to use a specific filter for this test.
And there's a question on pyrometry. What pyrometry was used in the kilns to ensure the destruction temperatures were reached?
Sure. So the pyrometry used at Norlite is used in the combustion zone of the kiln. This is a bit technical, and I'll explain it the best I can. So what we're looking at with pyrometers in that system is the actual flame zone, which you could see it in the control room picture. You could see the flames in there. So there are pyrometers that go directly into that flame zone to tell what the temperature is, and then there's a pyrometer that goes to the shale exit temperature. So part of this CPT, DEC had Norlite do a study on these pyrometers to associate what the actual pyrometers are seeing in the combustion zone and relate that to the back end of the kiln. So we know at all times during this test what exactly that combustion zone temperature is and how that relates to what we're monitoring on the back end. So that's where the pyrometry is. That's also displayed on the control panel. So even though it's not required by the permit, it's not required for Norlite to do. This is something we watch, DEC watches. It's something we're interested in, and they're doing a complete study on that right now, separate from the CPT, but at the same time.
Great, thanks, Ben. And just back on the filter, sorry. Actually, the question was about the grade of the filters. So do you know the filter grade or micron size that they use?
It is all specified in that. I can't memorize all the technical methods that EPA specifies in there. All of that is specified right in the protocol. It's specified in the EPA method itself, and that has to be followed. I'd have to go back and look at all that. There's so much information that I can't commit it all to memory.
Great. So, Ben, before we continue on with questions here, I do know that Assemblyman McDonald has joined us and was trying to say a few words before. Regina, I think we have his phone number. If you could unmute his line now, and Assemblyman would like to just offer you the opportunity to say a few words if you like.
Thank you, Sean, and to everybody, thank you for your participation. I want to thank Mayor Keeler for really shepherding this process. I want to thank DEC for being a partner in this process. You know, I've had the opportunity to work with Norlite for over 21 years. We've had some challenges, but we've also had some successes. I found it in my experience when the public has the opportunity to really ask the questions, to actually get on site and see what happens, they'll realize that some of their questions will be answered. And I think, you know, it's important, and DEC has demonstrated in this past, and I know will continue to do so in the future, that as questions come up, and we've had some recently about soot and dirt and dust and all that, that they get back in a reasonable period of time with an accurate answer. And I know that's what I would expect, and I appreciate everyone's participation. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman. Appreciate that. And yes, we are always here to provide those technical answers that folks have. We want to keep this conversation and dialogue going, obviously, with this community and others that we're engaged in, because, you know, we are here on your behalf, working day in and day out to make sure you and other New Yorkers are protected, because that is our fundamental goal, and doing so in the best available science, laws, and regulations of the state. So appreciate that. Assemblyman, thanks for joining us as well. Regina, I know we did get some email questions in prior and during this event. You know, some of what Ben talked about was, you know, driven by some of those questions, but did we have any email questions that had come in that, you know, maybe Ben didn't address that we should ask now?
Yes. So is Norlite now, one question is that came in is Norlite now able to burn 24/7?
Norlite can burn 24/7 using natural gas. They can burn 24/7 using waste fuel. And as I said during the presentation, I touched on this, they have time left where they can actually burn hazardous waste also. And as soon as they submit that notice of compliance demonstrating emissions compliance with us, they can then operate as much as they want to.
Thanks. And Regina, any other ones? Regina, any other email questions that we received?
Let me just check in this 1 second.
Okay.
Has Norlite concluded all of their test burns for 2020?
Yes, all of the test burns for 2020 are complete.
Great. So, Regina, we'll open this up to any questions from those who aren't on the WebEx and only calling in this evening. Obviously, those that were just calling in, difficult, I imagine, for you to see the slides. So, like we said before, this event is being recorded tonight and will be available online on a Norlite website. So you can always check back and rewatch the slides that Ben presented here tonight. But if there is an attendee who is just on by phone and has a question that they would like to ask, you can hit *3 on your phone to raise your hand now, and we will unmute your line and allow you to ask your questions. So if you're on the phone and would like to ask a question, please hit *3 now. Regina, do you see anybody?
Yep, we have one. The begins with 518-265. I'm about to unmute your line.
Great.
You're unmuted.
Thank you so much. I have a question regarding the November 24th complaint of the soot. And I understand that you said you were going to analyze that matter and determine whether that was from Norlite's operations or not. I mean, it seems pretty clear from the filters that that soot did not come from Norlite. And I would just like to know, when you do determine where that came from, will that be shared so that the concerned citizens in Cohoes can be reassured that that is not from Norlite, or will that suspicion be allowed to linger?
Yeah, that's a great question. The point of me showing the filters and everything was to demonstrate that it's not coming from the stacks, because that is what a lot of people's perception is, that the stacks are raining down a toxic brew of whatever or particulate or soot all over them. So in looking at that, in looking at those samples that were taken on November 24th, if they don't come back as soot, what DEC will look at is, what is the source? Could it still be Norlite? Absolutely, it could still be Norlite, but what is the process? What's the source that's creating that dust? So if we can show that it's not the stacks, we move on to what it could be. And that's the process of people calling in complaints and us responding in a timely manner, is to get those samples and then determine what they're not, and then determine what they are, and then find the source and then fix that problem. And that's part of, if it turns out to be dust from something else, we can look at the fugitive dust plan. So it might not be from the stacks, but it still could be from Norlite. And that's something that we will work on. And that's something with the complaint response that we're doing.
Thank you very much.
So absolutely, we will give those results back when we get them all in.
Yes, I look forward to Norlite being vindicated of that particular accusation.
Thank you very much for that comment and question. Again, anyone who is just on the phone here this evening, please hit *3 if you'd like to raise your hand and ask any questions. Regina, do we have any other phone calls?
So no other phone calls, though. Just for the last caller, just a reminder to press, after you've asked your question, press *3 again to lower your hand. And then I do have two more attendees. Oh, actually, we have one more phone call user that just added. I can't see their number, though. It's just coming up all zero. So I'm going to unmute the caller right now.
Thank you, Gigi.
Hi, you're unmuted.
Hello, could you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, my question is this. Why can't that big pile of shale be covered up? Now, if you go down 787 across from the arsenal, you look across the river, you see a big pile over there. I believe it's the cement company. They have a big cover over that cement. It's a black cover, and it's been there for years. Now, why can't Norlite do something like that to prevent that dust from blowing all over?
A very great question, and actually our next presenter tonight, Salm Wyckoff, will be going over the mining aspects of our oversight, and I imagine she can touch on that in her next presentation. So if you hang on a little bit, once we get through questions on the air side, we'll let Salm take that over and walk you through how we go about looking at the mining aspect of their operations.
And I have another question. Those two filters, the two filters that you showed me, on my computer, I'm looking at it, and I got the impression that the one on the right, on the top on the right, was supposed to be clean. But looking at my computer, that don't look clean to me. It looks dirtier than the one on the left.
Yeah, that, as I explained in the pictures, the lighting in that trailer, and I'm taking pictures with a cell phone. I mean,
well, why aren't they both the same?
That's because of the lighting in the room. I knew that was going to be an issue.
No, what I'm saying is the filters are very close to one another. That light should hit on those two filters the same way, I would think.
The light is all the way to the left of me in the trailer. There's one light in the trailer, and it's probably 10 feet to the left of me.
It sure looks dirty to me.
Yeah.
We'll obviously try and improve the quality of those pictures, but I think, what Ben was talking about does remain with regard to, the actual observations that we saw, and that you would expect, I think, to see a lot more different particulate matter on a filter if there was a lot coming out of the stacks. And that was really the purpose of Ben trying to show those pictures as well. So thank you very much for your questions. Again, if you are on the phone, give it one last shot on the phone only and would like to ask a question, please hit *3 to raise your hand and we'll unmute your line. Regina, anyone else?
No other phone users right now. We can, do you want to move on to those that are joining us on the computer?
Sure. If there are any folks that are on the WebEx would like to raise their hand to ask a question of Mr. Potter specific to the comprehensive performance test or air emissions, we'll be happy to take those. Others that I see coming in the chat regarding the monitor and other things we can handle later on this evening as well. But are there any attendees that would like to ask a question now, Regina?
Okay, so the first one is Laura. Hey, Laura, you're unmuted.
Hi, my name's Ken. I've lived down here for over 60 years. I'd like to know a couple of things. Is Norlite always informed ahead of time that there's going to be a test? Number one. Number two is, do you ever do water, soil, or air testing off of Norlite property to see what exactly is flying around in the air that you can't see it with the naked eye unless it's at night and you're looking through like a street light haze and then you can see the dust?
Great questions. I think first, and Ben, you can back me up on this, we do both announced and unannounced inspections regarding the facility operations. That's obviously our goal to make sure we do a good mix of both. And as we talked about in last month's presentation, we are undertaking currently a comprehensive analysis around the Norlite facility, specifically focused on PFAS compounds, or those typically found in firefighting foam, to see if anything had come out of the stacks from the processing of firefighting foam, but also looking at some of the more historic and legacy metals that are associated with their operations to see if there are any off-site impacts. And that study is very much still underway, and we do look forward to providing a presentation in the future on the outcome of that study. But Ben, anything else to add on either of those questions?
Yeah, if the question was, do we announce tests as in stack tests? All stack tests have to have a protocol that is approved before they do that. Stack test isn't something you just go in and do willy-nilly.
No, I mean, because if Norlite knows you're coming on the 10th, they can always turn around and say, hey, we're not going to do this. We're going to tone everything down. We're going to run it calm. The guys are here for the testing for the week. Run it calm. Next week, we'll go back up to normal production.
That's why we have those operational parameter limits that we monitor to ensure that they don't do that.
Where have you monitored above or off of Norlite property to check this? Because I can stand in my backyard and turn on a light on my shed and see the dust flying in the air from Norlite when there's a south breeze blowing.
Sure, and with regard to complaints like that, please make sure you alert DEC whenever you detect something like that, because we need to hear this information and obviously be able to go out and investigate it, as Ben walked you through how we're investigating the most recent complaints that we received in November as well. It is a priority of ours to make sure that, any and all complaints are looked into and addressed, and that's why we need this information. And again, our next presenter, Sam, is going to walk through the mining aspect of that. And again, that's going to provide some probably additional information with regard to their operations on the site. But anytime there are complaints, we'll make sure at the end of this, there are our complaint hotlines and ways in which you can provide us with information about issues like you're speaking about so we can investigate them.
So you've never heard these questions before or thought of doing this beforehand?
Oh, no, we've used a mix of, obviously inspections, both announced and unannounced, as Ben spoke about. And, with regard to offsite investigations, we've recently launched one specific to the concerns that were raised about the facility processing firefighting foam. So we have a targeted investigation underway right now around the facility. But again, the more complaints that we get, the more that we can then tailor any additional activities that we have to do. Great, Ken, we really appreciate your questions. Regina, are there any other attendees that would like to ask a question at this time?
Yep, the next one in line is Joe Ritchie.
Thanks. Hi, Joe.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, well, thanks for having me today, and thanks for doing this. I just had a quick question in regards for Ben. I know when I had made a couple of complaints last month, they had subsequently followed up and they were doing testing in regards to that particulate matter. That actually very day that they were there was actually a very large dust storm coming from Norlite. And I'm not sure if they had just got there towards the end of it or if they were there during it. But I could see it at least half a mile down the road, especially in that area. And I did report it. So my question is like, yeah, I noticed earlier that the acceptable dust or soot, or I don't know if it was just for soot, is you can't see with your naked eye, but I can clearly see within a 24-hour period dust accumulating on my car, and then when I run my fingers over it, my fingers really gray and dark. So I would just really consider you guys. I know you guys have to go through these protocols and everything for these tests, but waiting 3-4 weeks every time a test comes through, it's just kind of. I know it's supposed to be very thorough, but I would just really appreciate if the results could come a little bit quicker, because there are people that are just breathing in this stuff, and we really want answers to these problems. The second thing is when a call is made about a smell, usually how quickly does DEC is able to get on site to investigate? Because sometimes the smells just come and go with the wind. So if someone makes a call that there's a horrible smell, I mean, I live there and the smell is just unbearable at times. I don't view that to be acceptable at all. And I have to sometimes hold my breath to get to my car because I know what I'm breathing in is not good. It just does not smell at all pleasant. And sometimes the smell just dissipates within the next few minutes or so because of the wind. The wind changes direction. So how quickly is DEC able to get on site once a call is made? And just because they don't smell anything, the wind could just change direction and just move the smell in another area. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Good questions. I know, Ben, you can answer these, but some of them will be addressed by Sam in the next presentation as well. So, Ben, why don't you give your perspective, and we'll let Sam give her presentation here in a bit.
Yep. You got two detailed questions there, Joe. You saw me responding to that complaint on the 24th because I met you out in the parking lot. And part of what we're talking about here with the complaint response is determining actually what the problem could be. So the complaint that came in, and I think it was you that filed that complaint, was that it was soot coming down from the stacks. So that was the complaint that I'm responding to. And what you're talking about right now is dust coming and blowing across the road and everything. I wasn't there for a dust storm going across the road, but what I did see and what I took the samples of was there was definitely dust there. So what we're going to do is responding to these complaints is what is the source? If it's not the stacks, if it's not soot coming down as the complaint alleged, then what is it? If it's coming from Norlite, what process is there that could be causing that problem? So that is part of the complaint response, and having these complaints called in and having DEC get there in a timely manner to look at what you're reporting you're seeing, and then what can we associate it with if it's coming from Norlite's operation? What part of Norlite? Because there's several parts of Norlite. There's a lot of things going on there besides just those two stacks that you're looking at the seam coming out of. So what part? And that goes into having these complaints come in, like the one that the prior gentleman said about the nighttime dust. We get these, we can respond to them, and if we get good complaints with good information, we can determine what source on that site could be causing a problem. So these are the things we need to respond to, is complaints like this, and that's how it works for us fixing these problems. The next thing you talked about was odor response, and how quickly can we be there. During normal daytime operations, when we have an on-site monitor there, if he's there, he can go out and look at those odors. If it's called in at night or if it's called in at an off hour, we get there as quickly as possible. If we have response units in the area, they can sometimes be there within minutes. Sometimes it could take half an hour. It just depends on where our staff are at the time of complaint. But I think that got most of your question there, and as always, whatever you have, just ask.
Yep. Yeah, thank you very much. I'll have more questions as we get deeper in, but thank you.
Great, thank you, Joe. And I know the question of enforcement has come up and in the chat here, and what types of enforcement have we taken in the past? I will direct you all to the website. We can post this in the chat thread here, a link to it, but we do have an enforcement history that's on the website, so you can see how we've acted in the past when violations have been detected at the facility and what we've required of them to address those. So definitely check our website. And we'll post that link as we can here momentarily. Regina, do we have any other hands raised on the attendee list currently?
Yes, it looks like we have a call-in user. Oh, no, I don't know if she has another question. It's the 518265. I'm not sure if that's from before or if she has another question. So I'll mute you.
Great, thank you, Regina.
Oh, you're muted.
Hi there. Yeah, we have another question. Thank you so much.
If the waste wasn't incinerated at Norlite, where would the waste go from there? How would it be dealt with?
Well, our obligation here is to obviously look at overseeing this facility. Depending on the types and characterizations of the waste, there are different permitted landfills in state and out of state that can accept different types of hazardous and non-hazardous materials. Obviously, for those that are in state, they would be subject to different DEC regulations. Obviously, provide a presentation in the future just on hazardous waste management in general as a society and sort of New York State's leading approach to making sure that our residents are protected from this. But it's a hard question to answer because it's a very dynamic type of system across the country.
So this is a liquid waste plant, and you're saying that we should, they want to bury it in a landfill?
No, you asked about the options, and what I was trying to provide is some of the different options that are available that entities and companies that produce this waste are available. Obviously, anything that would happen in New York State would be subject to various different permits and oversight from the department.
Okay. Do I have time for one more question?
Sure.
As far as I can see, New York State has got pretty much the highest regulations as far as waste and hazardous waste goes, as in getting rid of it, dealing with it. It seems that Norlite meets those standards every year. I mean, they're still in business, they're still going, and they're meeting the standards. They're passing the tests every year. With these obviously some of the highest, as being New York State, some of the highest standards in the United States.
That is correct. Our standards are very high. And Ben, I don't know if you want to talk specifically about, New York State's approach to that overall.
I think that's it for my questions, but.
Thank you.
I can go into that a little bit if you want me to, Sean, about New York State standards and being some of them superseding even EPA's.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so for some of these things, specifically dealing with Norlite, we have a whole toxic rule that often is more stringent than EPA standards. So we look at things in New York State in a deeper depth. That's why we end up modeling and looking at these toxics and how they impact the surrounding neighborhoods. So we do go above and beyond what EPA requires. And that is reflected in our permits, it's reflected in our modeling, it's reflected in Norlite's operation.
Thank you.
Excellent. Regina, do we have any other hands raised? We'll take one more question now, if there are any.
I'm going to go back to the user with the all that was showing up as all zeros. I'm not sure, the caller, I'm not sure if you were raising it again or just didn't take your hand down from earlier. So I'm going to unmute yours to see if you had another question. Oh, hi, did you have another question? Nope, so that was everyone's asked their questions. So.
All right. Thank you very much for those great questions. Want to transition now to our next presenter of the night. Regina, if you could go ahead to the next slide. We have Sam Wyckoff, who's our mine land reclamation specialist for DEC's Region 4, who helps oversee this facility as well. So Sam, why don't you take us away? I know in the last month's meeting, we had a number of questions on sort of the mining operation of the facility. And obviously, you're our awesome person on the ground there. So why don't you walk us through how you do your work every day?
Well, thank you, Sean. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sam Wyckoff. I'm the manager of the Mine Land Reclamation Program in Region 4. My program provides the regulatory oversight of Norlite with respect to the mining permit. And I'm going to review the history of mining at Norlite, the current operations, permit conditions that pertain to blasting, the reclamation plan, and the mining program staff involvement. So mining began at the site in 1956 by the Northern Lightweight Company, and they were mining shale and clay overburden for 19 years before the enactment of the Mine Land Reclamation Law. Norlite was very prompt and submitted one of the first mine land reclamation applications received by DEC. In 1977, seeker was implemented and applied to private actions that required state permits. And what this means is that any modifications adding area to the 1977 life of mine boundary or any material changes in the facility plans would be subject to seeker review. So from 1977 to 2008, Norlite submitted routine permit renewals with nominal changes. One of the more notable changes in the operation was that in 1993, they began storing clay in the North Quarry area, which is highlighted on this 1994 aerial photograph. In 2008, DEC standardized blasting conditions and added them to all mining permits in the state that authorized blasting. And I'm going to talk about those blasting conditions a little later in the presentation. Also in 2008, a permit modification was approved that expanded the shale excavation within the 1977 mine boundary. And because that northern overburden storage area was full, they added the 34-acre southern overburden storage area. In 2018, there was a modification to add 5 acres to the life of mine. There's an occasional batch of shale that goes through the crusher and does not meet the specifications for the kiln. So it is stockpiled and then sold as aggregate as a subbase. Norlite's current mining operation is a 132-acre life of mine area. And that includes the shale quarry, the overburden storage areas, and the raw shale stockpile and processing areas. For the purposes of the Mineland Reclamation Program, the 132-acre life of mine area is where the mining permit has jurisdiction. So the secondary manufacturing of the lightweight aggregate, which occurs after the crusher, is outside of the life of mine boundary. I would like to point out that the authorized area for the excavation of shale still remains within that 1977 mine boundary. And all authorized activities on the site in the life of mine boundary must be done in accordance with the Mineland Reclamation Permit and the approved plans and maps that are referenced in the permit. So the red line on this aerial is that 132-acre life of mine boundary that I just discussed. Clay is actively being stripped on the west side of the mine, and that clay is transported to the southern overburden storage area for permanent placement. And you can see the northern overburden storage area in the upper right of the image near Lark Street. The active quarry operations are in the center of the mine. The floor of the quarry is approximately 30 feet below sea level. And if the operations cease today, the quarry would fill and be a lake that's about 100 feet deep. But currently the water drains across the quarry floor to the sump on the east side of the mine, and then it is pumped out so that the operations can continue. And the raw shale stockpile and crusher are on the far east side of the mine, near the secondary manufacturing facilities. So, as you might imagine, the shale is drilled and blasted, loaded into trucks, and hauled to the processing area. And as I just mentioned, the quarry is dewatered. It is pumped dry to facilitate that activity. The quarry pump out water is discharged to the salt kill under a speedies permit. And there are many aspects of the operation that are subject to specific permit conditions, including the hours of operation, dust control, handling of topsoil, fuel, stormwater, and also the construction and operation of the southern overburden area. So the hours of operation in the Mineland Reclamation Permit pertain only to the mining activities inside the life of mine boundary, and they're specific to particular areas. So within the 1977 mine boundary, the operations are limited to 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday. In the southern overburden storage area, the operations are limited to 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 7 to 4 on Saturday. And blasting is limited to 9 to 4 Monday through Friday. In the mining permit, there is a special condition concerning dust control. And that special condition states that water or an approved palliative must be applied to haul roads and other surfaces as often as necessary to prevent visible dust from leaving the site. And you'll recall that a little earlier I mentioned that DEC added standard blasting conditions to all the Mineland Reclamation permits that authorize blasting. In particular, there are limits on ground vibrations, which is how much the ground shakes, and there are air blast limits, which is how loud the blast can be. And to ensure compliance with these limits, there is a special condition that requires seismograph monitoring at the closest residential receptor and any locations identified by the DEC. And the closest residential receptor changes as the blasting is conducted in different locations in the quarry. So past monitoring locations have included Lark Street, Bott Street, Subdivision streets off of Bott Street and Saratoga Street. And other sites have been monitored in response to past complaints. Those vibration limits that are in the permit are based on studies by the U.S. Bureau of Mines and are intended to prevent cosmetic damages to homes. Those studies were based on many years of studies of homes in close proximity to large quarries, specifically, or more like most often, coal mines. And those vibration limits that we have adopted that came from that study are used in most other states that regulate blasting at mines. On the left side of this slide is the Z-curve, which is attached to the permit and is a graphic representation of the ground vibration limits. And without getting too technical, all the blasting vibrations, all the ground vibrations must be under the Z-curve. And you might be able to see the lines on the Z-curve, and I'm looking for a pointer. The lines under the Z-curve are have labels that say drywall and plaster. And that's because, as I mentioned, the Z-curve is intended to prevent cosmetic damage to the two structures, and these materials are the least competent materials in a house or building. And these limits would be protective of more competent materials, such as foundations. And on the right side of the slide is a seismograph printout from a receptor on Bott Road. And the seismograph measures vibrations in 3 directions: up and down, left and right, and forward and backwards. So you can see that on the seismograph, there are 3 recordings in those 3 directions. And these lines look like what people typically think of when they think of a seismograph. And each of these peaks on those recordings are also plotted on the seismograph Z-curve. So these red lines here point to the highest peak reading that's reported as a value, shown as a peak on one of those seismograph readings, and as a plot on the Z-curve. So in this example, all of the ground vibrations were under the Z-curve and were in compliance with the permit. Some of the other standard blasting conditions in the permit require that the blasting must be conducted by a licensed surveyor. There are limits on the hours that blasting can be conducted. Blasting must be done to prevent injury and property damage. There is a prohibition on fly rock leaving the property, and there are specifications on the proper handling and storage of explosives. And I would point out that Norlite does not store explosives on site. Norlite's reclamation plan, it includes a final reclamation objective that's a 70-acre lake. That's maximum depth will be approximately 355 feet. The surface elevation will be at 70 feet, approximately the level of the salt kill. And all of the vertical faces, or nearly all of the vertical faces, will be underwater. The side slopes in the clay will be 1-on-2 and will be revegetated with grass and legumes. DEC calculates the estimated cost of reclamation, and Norlite's required to have a financial security in the amount of $1.36 million. And the department holds that financial security, which can be thought of as an insurance policy to guarantee that the reclamation gets done. The Mineland Reclamation staff conducts routine compliance inspections, which are typically annually or as often as necessary. We respond to complaints, which may include inspections and collection of records as necessary. And we will monitor blasts with our seismograph and will review blasting records in response to complaints to ascertain if blasts are in compliance with the vibration limits in the permits. For example, in response to complaints from neighbors north of the quarry in 2008 and 2010, 17 blasts were either reviewed and or monitored by staff, and all of those blasts had vibrations that were within the limits contained in the permits. The permit renewal applications are required every 5 years, and the current permit expires February 11th, 2025. And that concludes my presentation regarding Norlite's mining operations. We had one question, I believe, that I might answer before we open questions again.
Sure, take it away, Tom.
Okay, so there was a question regarding a pile on the other side of the river that is covered. And it is my understanding that the pile on the other side of the river is salt. And that pile is required to be covered because, of course, stormwater that would come in contact with that salt would dissolve that material, and the runoff would have elevated sodium levels, which would have obviously environmental issues if it wasn't handled properly. And if Ben's, the testing of the particulate that Ben mentioned earlier shows that that particulate is raw shale, that would be shale that has not yet gone through the kiln, then of course, as Ben mentioned, the next step would be to identify where in the facility that material could be coming from, and it could possibly be from haul roads, stockpiles, the crusher, etc. So that is a process that we are obviously we have ongoing at this time.
Great, thank you, Solom. And Regina, starting again like we did before, are there any email questions that we had received specific to mining or Solom's presentation tonight?
Yeah, so this one kind of goes along with what Sam was just talking about, but what sort of dust control measures can be taken, and what level of kind of dust discharge or dust leaving the site from Norlite is acceptable?
Okay, well, with regard to the mining permit, as I mentioned, the mining permit pertains to activities within the 132-acre life of mine boundary, which does not include the secondary manufacturing activities. The special condition regarding dust in the mining permit states that they have to apply water or another approved dust palliative to any of the haul roads or surfaces to prevent visible dust from leaving the property. Any dust that might be coming from the secondary manufacturing would fall under Ben's program, and the crusher could be a source of dust, and I do believe that the air permit for the crusher has particulate limitations, but Ben could probably address that.
Yeah, Ben, do you want to add anything to that? Ben, are you muted?
Yep, my phone was muted. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting into when I was saying about finding the source of what's leaving the site. There's many sources besides the crusher, the mine, the stacks. That's what I'm talking about, is looking into everything and figuring out exactly what the problem could be. So yeah, definitely the crusher could be an issue. When I was there, every time I've been there, it hadn't been an issue, but that's something we're looking into.
Thank you. And to some of the questions there, definitely, we are always looking into adapting our oversight of this facility as we get complaints or as there are issues, and we're evaluating always what's in the best interest of area residents. And that's why those complaints, and I'll introduce Tony Luisi here in a minute, who's going to walk us through how you can submit complaints to the department. But that's why it's so critical, because that information obviously really does allow us to tailor our ongoing oversight of this facility. Tom, another question we have, you did go over the life of mine and the mine land reclamation plan that the facility submits, but what is the life expectancy of the shale operation in this area?
Norlite has significant shale reserves in the permitted life of mine area, and the reclamation plan shows that that mine can go significantly deeper. I don't have a very definitive date for how long they could be mining, but they have shale reserves that could last several decades at the rate that they're mining currently. Of course, mining is always, the rate of mining is always subject to market demand, so that changes at various times.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Salam. So I don't think we have any other email questions, but again, we'll open it up to any folks on the phone who have a question of Salam regarding the mining presentation that she gave. Again, this presentation is being recorded tonight, will be posted on our website, so you can go and watch through the slides that Salam walked us through tonight. But obviously happy to answer any questions that you have. And if you are on the phone and would like to ask a question, please hit *3 to raise your hand and we will unmute your line. Regina, do we have any phone questions coming in?
Yep. I have one phone question. One moment. Sorry. My computer's freezing. One moment. Sorry.
You're fine, Regina.
My program just froze on me, so I'm waiting.
That's quite all right. Well, Regina, while you're looking at that, I think we've got some other chat questions here. Let me see.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, so Salam, I think one of the questions is regarding pile storage. We touched on that a little bit, but what are the laws and regulations that require or that oversee storage of piles on the site? And are there specific requirements or setback rules or anything that's specific to Norlite or any facilities such as this?
Sure. Generally, the stockpiling must remain inside the life of mine. The regulations have a specific setback distance that any tow of a stockpile must be 25 feet from a property line, which in this case, all of the raw shale stockpiles are well within the property.
Great. Regina, are you back online? Or do we have any phone call folks that want to answer a question? All right, appears we're having some technical difficulties, folks. So while we get that resolved on our end, hopeful that someone can move forward to the next presentation here, and we'll just queue up Tony to walk us through now just how to get in contact with DEC. So point of order, Tony is our current regional attorney for DEC's Region 4. He is transitioning to be the acting regional director here shortly, as our current regional director, Keith Gertz, is retiring. We bid Keith, obviously, a fond farewell. He was a great leader in the region for many years, and we wanted to give Tony a chance this evening to introduce himself quickly and obviously, again, walk through how you can submit comments and complaints to DEC that we can then act upon. So hopefully someone can click through the PowerPoint slides and we can get that information up online right now.
Thanks, Sean. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Tony.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. As Sean mentioned, my name is Tony Luisi, Regional Attorney for DEC Region 4. DEC believes it's critical for the public to have the facts, to be engaged, and to have questions answered regarding DEC's permitting process and regulatory oversight. So I want to take a few minutes to provide information on how best the public can contact us to submit questions or to report concerns regarding the Norlite facility. In order for DEC to be able to take effective action in response to matters that may be potentially short-term in duration, such as complaints of odors, noise, off-site dust, and so forth, timeliness of getting that information to DEC directly is key. So for that reason, we want to make sure everyone knows the best ways to contact us. First and foremost, in the event of an emergency, please call 911. In addition, the DEC spill hotline runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and should be used to report any time-sensitive complaints or concerns. This allows DEC to appropriately respond and investigate, including during off hours and weekends, and allows us to create a written record of concerns and responsive actions. The hotline number is 1-800-457-7362. If you're unable to get through the hotline for any reason, which should not be happening, please report it to us so that we can correct the issue immediately. Any questions or concerns that are specific to the facility's mining operations should be directed to Salm Wyckoff during normal business hours at 518-357-2254. Any public health-related inquiries should be submitted directly to the Department of Health at either 518-402-7950 or by email at beoe@health.ny.gov. And everyone should know that DEC and the Department of Health are working hand in hand throughout this entire process. DEC also wants to make sure that all interested parties and local residents in the community are being kept informed of DEC's review of the pending permit applications and future scheduling of important public meetings and opportunities for formal public comment, which will be occurring after the new year. If you're not already on DEC's mailing list and would like to be, please let us know at 518-357-2075 or by email at comments.norlite2020@dec.ny.gov. You're encouraged to use the same phone number and email address for any general questions or concerns that are not specific to any particular permit or program area. And if you don't choose to sign up for the mailing list, as a member of the public, you'll still receive future notification of relevant events and meetings through notices in the local newspaper and through DEC's Environmental News Bulletin. In addition, DEC has been and will continue to post information and documents on DEC's website in response to frequently asked questions and requests in order to simplify and improve access to relevant public materials. So please check the DEC website if you're interested, as there will be regular updates throughout the coming weeks. And finally, in addition to what's already been mentioned, any permitting related questions can be directed to the Acting Regional Permit Administrator, Kate Kornack. Solid waste related issues can be directed to the Regional Materials Management Supervisor, Brian McLiente. And any questions relating to wastewater discharge or the State Pollution Discharge Elimination System Program can be directed to the Regional Water Engineer, Derek Thorsland. Their contact information is on this screen. And as mentioned, whenever in doubt about who is the right person to contact, you can use the general number 518-357-2075 or send an email to comments.norlite2020@dec.ny.gov. And that's it. So I'm happy to answer any questions about communicating with DEC.
Great. Thank you, Tony. It was a very helpful overview. We're still sorting through some of the technical difficulties here, but I think Sam is now our host and will be helping to facilitate those questions coming up. But one question we do have, Tony, that came in with regard to the speedies discharges that we spoke about earlier. I know we don't have any water experts on the line here tonight, but do you know enough to just talk generally about the requirements on any of the speedies discharges and how they may be monitored from the site into the salt field?
Yeah, sure. I can speak generally. Of course, Derek Thorsland would be more appropriate to get into the technical aspects of it, but the facility has a speedies permit for a variety of outfalls. They previously or historically had an outfall, it was called outfall number 6, that has since been decommissioned and discontinued as part of their Project Delta, which was a series of upgrades to the facility that began last year. There are still a few outfalls that are under permit, and as required by the Clean Water Act, those outfalls are monitored for a variety of parameters and limits. Some have set numeric limits, some are required to be monitored, and obviously there are discharge monitoring reports that the facility is required to submit to DEC, and if there are any issues, DEC will follow up, take appropriate investigative action, and if necessary, enforcement.
Great. And Tony, not to put you on the spot in your new role either, but we love acronyms here at DEC and throw them about quite readily, expecting everyone to know what we're talking about. So SPEEDIES is one you've heard a couple times tonight, and obviously that stands for the State Pollution Discharge Elimination System. But Tony, do you want to explain what that permit is in general?
Yeah, essentially, it's what EPA has delegated to the state of New York under the Clean Water Act's National Permit Discharge Elimination System that governs the discharge of pollutants from a point source to waters of the state. So everything I just said is a legal term of art that has been litigated and means different things in different states. So I don't know if we have enough time to get into all of that, but essentially what it is DEC's regulation of the discharge of pollutants to surface waters and groundwater.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Tony. So, Sam, I'm going to put you on the spot here in our new virtual world in which we all live and work in, and obviously, hopefully, we can facilitate any QAs from the folks that are still online here today, and we'll start with those on the phone. If you are on the phone and would like to ask a question, you can hit *3 to raise your hand, and we will work to unmute your line. Sam, does that work for you, and do you see anyone with a hand raised?
There was a moment ago, and that hand just disappeared. So, and they're back. I'm going to try to unmute the call-in user whose number just reports as a bunch of zeros. So, here we go.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay, you're unmuted.
Hello.
Hello.
And that call.
Hello.
That call just disappeared. They may be on a cell phone and have a bad connection.
Hello.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. That's good. Look at the lady that just made a presentation there about the covering of salt. It doesn't matter what's underneath the covering. My question is, why can't the covering like that be put on top of the pile over in Norlite? Why can't it be covered up? I don't care what's underneath over in Troy. It could be anything under there, but that's an example. Why can't we use that example over in Norlite?
Well, as was mentioned earlier, there's a study of the particulate matter that's been collected around the site, and if that material is determined to be raw shale, we will look at where that might be coming from on the site, and at that point we can make a determination of what would be the most effective and appropriate mitigation measure, and covering a pile may be one of those mitigation measures.
Well, it only stands to reason to me, if the wind is blowing, it's blowing dust around. And if there was a cover on top of it, that dust would not be blowing around as much. And I don't see why that can't be done.
Yep, and we hear you loud and clear on that. And again, as we've said, we're always adapting our oversight of this facility, and that's definitely something we'll take back to the team and see what we can move forward on in the future.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Sam, do you see any other folks who have joined us by phone with their hands up? Again, if you'd like to ask a question, it is *3 to raise your hand, and we can unmute your line.
There is a person with their hand up. The symbol looks like it could be a cell phone, and that hand is coming from someone named Michael. And I'll unmute them now.
Great, thank you.
Michael, you're unmuted.
Hi, Michael. Are you able to ask a question? All right. Michael, we'll come back to you if you'd like to raise your hand again. Again, you can press *3 to raise your hand if you're on the phone. Solomon, if we don't have any other hands raised from folks on the phone, are there any on the WebEx here who have raised their hands and would like to ask a question?
Looks like we have 3 or 4 people with their hand raised on the WebEx. So I will unmute Laura McKenzie.
Great.
Hello?
Laura? Yes, you're unmuted.
Yes.
Hey, Laura.
I've heard a lot of talk about you want us to reach out to notify. My question is, you say that these notices are on these websites. We would not have known about this meeting tonight if at that exact moment we weren't watching the news and saw it there. We live doors away from Norlite. What are you doing to reach out to the community, the immediate community that is most impacted?
That is a really great question. And obviously, you know, our goal is to always make sure that we're getting information in the hands of folks like you who want to get it. So one of the primary tools that we have is our email address list for the area. And if you provide us with your name and contact information to the comments.norlite2020@dec.ny.gov, we can make sure that you're on that list. And obviously, we continue to work with Mayor Keeler and his administration to get the word out to the community, because we always want to make sure that folks are aware of these events that we're hosting and to keep you engaged. So again, comments.norlite2020@dec.ny.gov is one of the ways in which we can get your information and get you registered for our lists. But again, any of the experts that you see here or you heard from tonight, please reach out and feel free to call them directly, and we'll make sure that we're notifying you of future events.
I understand that, and now that I'm aware, but there are a lot of people who are not aware that these discussions are happening and that they can have a voice. Thankful to the mayor that he did talk about it on the news tonight, but not everybody is watching that.
Exactly. That's
Norlite needs to engage their immediate community.
Yep, that's why we're always looking for other ideas and ways to get information out, and obviously work with residents like you who may have good connections in the community to help spread the word. So love to talk to you after, and I know Regina is having some technical issues here. She might be back, but Regina Willis is one of the key point people on the communication side for our regional office, and you can definitely reach out to her at any point in time and work with us on making sure we're spreading the word in all the right ways to the community and making sure folks are aware of these events.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Sam or Regina, do we have any other hands raised from those on the WebEx here with questions?
Yes, we have several. I'll unmute Joe Ritchie next.
Great.
Well, it looks like my ability to unmute is up.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Oh, it's it.
Yeah.
Hi. Well, I just had a quick comment and then some questions. It seems to be like a lot of people are having trouble with the raise hand function. They say it's disabled.
Yep, I see that coming. We're working to address that, Joe, but I think just to pause you there for a second, if you do have a question and you are unable to raise your hand on the chat function or on WebEx, just type it into the chat and we'll make sure we unmute your line here.
Great, thank you. And I guess a question I have is I'm just curious, like what the workers are, they're mining there. What safety measures are they taking? Because there are a lot of diseases associated with mining these types of materials. That's just one of my questions, but I didn't know if you were able to answer that. What safety precautions are the workers taking?
The safety of the miners falls under the jurisdiction of the federal Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA. And MSHA is not present with us today, but they do oversee the same facility and conduct inspections with regard to the miner safety.
They're having to go in total 120%.
That does not fall under the jurisdiction of the DEC.
Like that is a warning flag.
Oh, we've got another hot mic somewhere there, so we'll have to mute that other line. But Joe, obviously, that question could be best directed to the facility as well. We are working with them to have them put on some additional public outreach events and to, be able to answer some of those questions like that as well. So stay tuned for other things in the future that the facility will be doing directly. Obviously, tonight we wanted to keep the conversation focused on DEC's oversight of the Norlite facility and the actions that we have underway. And we are encouraging the facility to make themselves available as well in the future.
All right, thank you. And another question is I have, why doesn't Norlite attend these sessions to speak about questions regarding their facilities, like the plant manager or the people there, if you guys work directly together a lot? I'm just curious why they don't come.
Purpose of tonight was really to, again, continue the conversation on DEC's oversight. We'll take that back and obviously look to have the facility on in the future. We do know they are planning their own outreach and engagement events as well. But again, as the overseer and regulator, we wanted to make sure that you had the opportunities to hear directly from us and answer the questions that you have about our actions specifically.
All right, thank you. If I have any questions, I'll just raise my hand again. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Sam or Regina, who do we have next?
All right, next we have Tyler McNeil.
Hi. So
Hi
there. I have two questions. One being, and it was on the top of everything. One being, has Norlite had any infrastructure improvements or fixes within the last 6 months prior to testing?
Yes, Ben talked about what really drove the comprehensive performance test was their Project Delta to bring online an entire new air emissions technology. Ben, do you want to go into that a little bit?
Oh, just what I meant was, have they, when Project Delta was completed, which I believe was May or June, correct? I was just wondering, have they had anything since Project Delta was completed that they fixed?
So meaning once they did the initial checks of the system to make sure it was functioning properly? I guess, Ben, do you want to just go into that a little bit?
Yeah, since Project Delta, since the towers were built and the air pollution control equipment was replaced, the only thing that has happened there, to my knowledge, and because I've been there often, would be the decommissioning of some of the old equipment from the old wet scrubbers. Parts of the wastewater treatment plant that are no longer necessary to be used. So just decommissioning activities. Nothing new was built. Just maintenance.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Ben. Tyler, hope that helped answer your question. I think we'll move on to some of the others in the queue. Selma, Regina, who do we have on next?
Next we have Alexis Goldsmith.
Hi, Alexis.
Hi, thank you. I first just want to say a quick land acknowledgement and say that it is with gratitude and humility that I acknowledge that the site where Norlite sits now and my home in north central Troy resides upon the ancestral homelands of the Mohican people, who are indigenous peoples of the lands of New York. And despite tremendous hardships and being forced from their lands, today their community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Muncie community. And I pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present, as I commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. So on to my question, I hope that it's clear and that you can acknowledge that as you've walked us through the test burns and the operating parameter limits, It doesn't offer much reassurance knowing that Norlite has violated several permit parameters since its last test burn and permit renewals. And also the comments made by the on-site monitor were very cavalier about the community's concerns when it came to the issue of PFAS. So acknowledging that the test burns and the permit process has not stopped Norlite from making egregious violations in the past, at what point does the DEC make the call that this facility is unenforceable?
Thank you very much for that question, Sam. Tony, do you want to just walk us through sort of enforcement and how we approach it?
Well, sure. I'll speak generally and then specifically. As a general matter, obviously, any enforcement that we take needs to be predicated on the collection of evidence that we can use in an administrative enforcement proceeding that is presided over by an administrative law judge. So that evidence needs to be in the form of either documents or testimony, reports. So we first look at that, and when we discover that there is a violation at any facility, we will usually issue a notice of violation first, and then we'll proceed to either a complaint or an administrative enforcement order to see if we can resolve the violation on terms that would be consistent with the environmental conservation law and DEC enforcement priorities. With respect to this particular facility, you mentioned the prior CPT in 2017. We did take enforcement last year for certain record-keeping violations that were associated with some of the old air pollution control equipment that has since been replaced. And we reduced that enforcement to an order, and we assessed a penalty of, I believe, approximately $150,000. So I guess to answer the question, as always, we need to start with the facts, and then we apply the applicable statutes and regulations to ensure that enforcement is timely and complete and addresses any concerns that arose in connection with the violations. So if that was responsive, which I hope, great, and if not, I'm happy to answer more questions.
I guess the heart of my question is, there's a pattern at Norlite of violation and enforcement, and every enforcement action the DEC has taken, Norlite still violates its permits. So at what point do you say that this facility is not enforceable?
Well, Alexis, part of that is obviously the permit renewal process that we have underway, and that gives the community members a voice in that process. And clearly, if there are issues with regards to the permit, that's what we want to hear. And again, we'll have future conversations about that is going to be specific to the permit renewal applications, should we receive them from the facility, that will drive a lot of that conversation. So we obviously continue to look forward to working with you and the community members on giving you a voice and role in the permit process, obviously, and then taking your questions and considerations into the mix. But I think as Tony said, obviously, and why we wanted to put some of the information up here on the complaint lines and how to contact the department, we need the evidence with which to enforce against as well. So that's why we need the real-time complaints. Obviously, our monitors and expert staff are continuing inspections regularly of this facility, and anytime something is found, we're acting, and that's what our pattern has shown. But again, the permit renewal process is a great way of getting involved, and we'll be working with you in the future as that moves underway as well. And Alexis, not to cut you off, but I know Mayor Keeler had his hand up and wanted to just open it up for him to ask a question or say a few words. So Sam or Regina, if you could unmute the mayor's line and allow him to say a few words.
Thanks, Sean. I just wanted to weigh in before we took too many questions to the woman who had a hard time finding out about tonight's meeting. But probably the easiest way for anybody to find out what's going on in Cohoes is just to follow the City of Cohoes Facebook page. But specifically, if they want to get on our email list, they just need to send their email address to us at info@cohoes.org. cohoes.ny.us, and we will specifically alert them to anything that's going on in the community.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mayor. I think we have a number of other hands up here. We'll keep going through it. I believe Ms. Judith Enck has a question she would like to ask, and someone could unmute her line.
Oh. Judith, can you raise your hand so I can see where you are? Your hand was raised earlier. It's easier for me to click on to unmute you if you raise your hand. All right, hold on. I'll search for you. One moment. Yep. All right, Judith, I'm unmuting your line right now.
You are Judith. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, thanks. A couple things. Thanks for the time this evening. One is on the topic of enforcement. I really want to urge all the DEC staff and everyone on this call, including the mayor and the assembly member, to please read the EPA consent order. First, there are two key documents. One is a complaint that documented very serious and widespread violation of environmental law at Norlite. And then this past May, EPA issued a press release and announced the consent order attempting to address the violations. I cannot overstate how serious these violations are, and a concern that I have, and maybe Mr. Luisi, in your new capacity, it might be helpful to look at the many violations that EPA identified, and then not necessarily a requirement for Norlite to fix the problems. I mean, the fine was very insignificant. I wouldn't really focus on the fine, but there are some pretty serious operational problems at Norlite that took years of documentation. My second question is, I think some members of the public don't report complaints to the spills hotline because they're not calling about a spill. So you might consider renaming it for Norlite complaints. And the question I have is, does DEC Region 4 keep a log of all the complaints that come in related to Norlite in one location?
Thank you very much for Judith, and let's speak a little bit about this. But obviously, I think we're aware of what EPA and the actions that they had conducted, and obviously evaluate that as part of our ongoing efforts. Where EPA may take years, we don't, and obviously work quickly anytime violations are found to move aggressively, and that's what we've done, and we've got a track record of that. And that's going to continue because, again, I think as we've stated before, the violations that we've observed are not what we expect or like to hear about, and that's why we do enforce rather aggressively and quickly anytime violations are found. But Tony, do you want to walk specifically through the complaint log or how those are factored in by the region?
Sure. Well, it depends on how the complaint is received. So obviously any email that's sent to the comments.norlite2020 email address is preserved. Any phone call that we receive may or may not be reduced to some sort of written log, but if we send somebody out, there would be a record of that. And of course, anything called into the spill hotline is preserved. And that's why we encourage people to use that hotline so that we create a written record of complaints, the nature of the complaint, the date, the time, and the responsive act, and it allows us to better track the responsive action that we've taken. To date, I will say that the quantity of complaints over time has not yet warranted a unique new phone number that's specific to this facility, but that is something that we can continue to review and consider as circumstances change and evolve. And if it becomes necessary, it's something that we can certainly consider. Great, thank you.
Can I?
Sure. Keith, we have another question.
Yeah. So two things. One is I want to suggest that you create a log and that you make it publicly facing on your website so people can see the complaints coming in, the nature of the complaints, and any follow-up. You obviously can redact names and personal information. And then finally, I submitted 10 questions in advance to this meeting. And I'm wondering, just process-wise, I haven't heard answers to any of them, and we're almost 2 hours in. People who took the time to submit written questions in advance, can we get a response to our questions, or can the questions and answers be posted on the DEC website? Thank you.
And I obviously appreciate you reaching out, Judith, and sending those questions in. Some of them obviously had to be evaluated. I think Ben did, in part of his presentation, address some of them. Others that were more detailed are obviously under review by the department. We will be communicating directly back to you. Those that we can answer directly, we'll obviously answer directly, and we'll post them on the regular FAQ list that we have on there. Others, we may have to have you submit your request for information that you're looking for to FOIL, but we will be following up with you and others who submitted written questions as well. So we appreciate you doing that. Obviously, again, we tailored this presentation as best as we could. There are some questions, obviously, that other experts in the department will be necessary in future conversations to answer. Again, we wanted to focus on the CPT and air side of the equation, and also the mining side of the equation tonight as well. But we know there are questions on water and hazardous waste and others, and this dialogue is going to be continuing with you and the community as well. So if your question didn't get answered tonight, obviously we will be communicating with you, but we are going to keep this conversation and dialogue going as well. And obviously everything we heard tonight, we do take back as part of the team that we have overseeing this facility, and are obviously always adapting our enforcement and efforts on the ground to address those questions and needs. So I appreciate you joining us tonight and asking your questions. I do know that we have some other folks with their hands raised, and Regina or Sam, is there anyone else who wants to ask a question?
Yep, so we have a call-in user with the phone number starting with 518-858. So I'm going to unmute your line right now. Hi, are you there?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Mike Lyons, and I'm the president of the Greater Capital Region Building and Construction Trades Council.
I'm sorry.
Is there a echo? I'm sorry. Is it better now?
There you go. That's better. Yep, that's better.
Oh, all right. I apologize. I had you on 3 different screens. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I'd like to give just kind of a brief statement and then ask a question, if that's okay.
Yep.
I represent 22,000 members of the Greater Capital Region Building and Construction Trades Council, unionized construction workers, including the members of the operating engineers at the Norlite plant in Cohoes. I work, my day job is district manager for the operating engineers, so I know all the members at the facility, their families. I know that it's a generational job. The industrial base in the city of Cohoes, and certainly in the capital region, has been eroded over years, and Norlite is that one beacon of hope that we can actually, send members to and develop folks that are going to get a straight shot into the middle class. They're good union jobs. They provide wages that support a family and provide health and welfare, retirement benefits. They're valuable to upstate New York right now, especially during the pandemic. And they're the jobs that we really do think deserve respect and protection. We understand that Norlite is very concerned about environmental compliance. The company has made a $30 million investment to upgrade the environmental technology and the infrastructure. I was at the table with the powers that be at Norlite and at Tredebe to negotiate those changes. It made this investment with our unions and support and input and approval, with the expectation that we'd remain to operate and provide good union jobs for decades to come. The thing is we know Norlite permits and operations should be subject to the same rigorous oversight that the DEC exercises in other facilities. Really no more, no less. DEC's decision should be based on sound science, sound policy, and following the applicable law. We understand the DEC is under a lot of pressure right now. There's been a lot of criticism to the DEC as of late, and for years the agency's had a full-time employee on site as an environmental monitor who oversees all of Norlite's activities. and really has instant access to any records that are requisite to any of the operations that goes on. Recently DEC named a new environmental monitor, which is, a good change. And, you're incredibly rigorous in your oversight and enforcement of laws and regulations, and we operate entirely, and you guys operate entirely independently. We have a respectful professional relationship with DEC. It's clear our members at Norlite recognize that we can't operate without, your agency's approval. Listen, if you want safeguards in any facility, get a union, right? Because listen, those are our members. Those are our family members. Those are members of our community. And we work tirelessly. You can ask anybody that's in any management position at Norlite that we are constantly, putting them under our proverbial thumb to make sure that our members are safe. Our members work in that facility. Our members are, at ground zero, for lack of a better term, under those conditions. And we acknowledge the fact that they put such a giant capital investment to make sure that, the workers there were safe and we're going to be safe from relatively antiquated technology. We understand that our members live in the community, and that they're going to be subjected to the same exposure when they're on site as they are when they're at their house and when their kids go to school. We know Norlite better than anybody. We've been operating it for years through different ownerships, and we're angry that, folks that maybe haven't even stepped foot in our facility, especially after the upgrade, are making, accusations and potentially spreading falsehoods about what goes on there. We'll monitor the situation closely. Believe me, we're completely autonomous of Norlite. We represent 4,000 members upstate. In my capacity, I represent 22,000 unionized construction workers upstate. And it's been paramount and been a cornerstone of, what we do, that safety is always of the utmost concern. So we appreciate any support that we can get from the agencies, and, that we know that this is a very important product and an important situation in the Northeast that we cannot, at this time, especially, dealing with the pandemic that we're dealing with, that we can subject any more folks, working families, to being out of a job because of potential, misconceptions or, falsehoods, that we would be gladly to stand lockstep with Norlite as the union movement, as the organized labor movement, stand lockstep to dispel any of those myths and invite anyone into the facility to see what upgrades have been made in order to make sure that our members go to work the same way that they leave. So that's all I got, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mike. Appreciate your comments on that. Did you have a question too, or was that all you wanted to say?
Well, I just wanted to know if the workers at the site and at sites that have similar burning capacities around the capital region have been taken into consideration with a lot of these accusations.
Thank you for that. I mean, obviously our fundamental oversight is about public health and the environment, and that's really what we're grounded in. But obviously we take comments like yours, obviously, to heart in part of our ongoing enforcement efforts. And worker safety is obviously something that's important to us as well. And that's why when violations are found, we take steps to correct them to make sure that the workers in the surrounding community are not put at a risk, because that is our goal. So appreciate your comments tonight and for joining us on this presentation.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it.
And Regina, do we have anyone else with their hand raised for questions?
Yep. I have Dave P. I'm muting. There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So I have three issues that I want to bring up. Do you want them all at once, or do you want them in succession with a chance for answering in between?
You can give it to us all at once, and we'll break it down from there.
Okay. So one of the questions earlier that was repeated a couple times was by a local resident, and I'm not going to disclose his name because he chose not to, but this is about piles, okay? And you mainly directed it towards your mining person, but it may not necessarily go to her because I think a lot of his questions had to do with piles that are of the treated material, the aggregate, which has a high content of materials that could be described as glass-like, maybe abrasive, and also possibly very fine. So you seem to kind of punt that question to the future, but I'd like some clarification. Those piles are massive. They're near the border, and my question is whether, does this fall so far outside of DC's purview that you don't want to comment on it, or what is the situation with that?
Thank you, Dave. Sam or Tony, can you answer that, or do we need to kick this over to one of our other experts for future conversation?
Well, I think that a distinction that we need to keep in mind is that the life of mine boundary defines the area that is the mine and what's under the mining permit, and the raw shale pile that is dark gray that has not gone through the kiln is in the life of mine. Stockpiles of material that have gone through the kiln and are now lightweight aggregate are outside of the mine and are not part of the mining activity. So I'm wondering what piles Dave is referring to.
So can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They're for anyone who's visited the site anytime in the last 3 months, they're massive. They're visible. If you go up to where the train tracks are, you can see them clearly. So, but they are not, obviously directly from the mine. They're processed material. So I'm going to give you the other two questions just so I don't end up getting disconnected on this. And these were both put in the chat, and one of them was also put out in the one about the discharges, please go into more detail about the past wastewater discharges by Norlite. Many of the concerns expressed by the community on this line are not about what Norlite has been doing over the last 6 months with new equipment, but what they were doing for decades before that. And this is in slight response to the union guy. These aren't accusations. These are statements of fact. These have gone through the EPA. They are articles of fact, so they're not open to dispute. And then related to that, I'm going to give you my last thing so you can answer them both at once. This was the one that was asked in advance. The DEC on-site monitor at Norlite allowed incineration of AFFF by Norlite for 2 years. The monitor also recently made a statement to a reporter defending the incineration of PFAS as quote-unquote harmless. Was the incineration a violation of permits? Did the monitor communicate with anyone at the DEC about the AFFF burning before, during, or after the period of incineration? What qualifications are required for the on-site monitor position? And does the on-site monitor have any college or advanced degrees, especially in chemistry? Please answer all questions in detail. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Dave, for those questions. On the wastewater discharges, I think as we talked about earlier, and one of the next sessions that we have, we'll have our water experts on to go more in depth about that. I think Tony touched on it generally. Obviously, the speedies permit that guides any effluent discharges on the facility or from the facility are governed by our Division of Water. So we'll make sure we get a water expert on to walk through that for you in greater detail on the next one of these. Regarding the monitor, I will turn this over to Tony momentarily here, but our monitoring program is something that we take very seriously and always make sure that we are bringing the utmost expertise to bear on these facilities. And obviously we want to avoid having to place a third-party monitor on a facility, and usually it's a result of a facility with bad actors that we have to go down that path. But our monitoring staff and, obviously we are continuing to evaluate that program in general, as we always do. And I think we've heard from Mayor Keeler and others about, having a better rotational monitor that goes to some of these facilities. And provides different eyes on scene. And that's definitely something that we're evaluating regularly and constantly to make sure that we're bringing the utmost expertise to bear on these facilities. But Tony, do you want to talk a little bit about our monitor as well and sort of what goes into that program?
Sure, happily. So all of our hazardous waste inspectors and monitors must successfully complete a training program that often takes a year of on-the-job training, working with an experienced inspector. And once they successfully complete the training, their competence is reviewed by experienced DEC staff through oversight of a certification inspection performed by the trainee. And successful completion of the certification inspection results in the inspector becoming officially certified. And once certified, the inspector must conduct a minimum of 5 inspections per year in order to maintain the certification. Inspectors are also required to complete an initial 40-hour training regarding field operations and human health protection, and then are required to complete 8-hour courses annually to maintain that knowledge, like many other professionals. Inspectors are also required to take part in an annual inspector training workshop in order to maintain and expand their knowledge of the program, and of course, overall, maintain active communication with relevant DEC staff and report problems and concerns.
Great. Thank you, Tony. So obviously, our monitoring program is very comprehensive. It's something we take seriously. With regard to the past comments from our monitor, when we did our investigation, I think we went into this last time. Again, the wastes at the time were not regulated as hazardous wastes, and the facility did not have to seek a permit modification from us or present any additional information to us or seek approvals. Since that time and subsequent to our look back at this, it's why we've taken the steps that we have that was unveiled in our June letter that we talked about in the last presentation, where we've effectively now shut the door to that. And anytime the facility wants to take on a new waste stream that is not a regulated hazardous waste or is unregulated in any way, they have to seek a permit modification from the department in order to do that. So that was our way of further tightening our oversight over this facility and making sure that we were bringing the utmost regulatory stringency to our oversight of this facility. So we regularly, as we live in this evolving world of emerging contaminants and new environmental threats out there, constantly evolving and adapting our oversight to make sure that, once again, we're bringing the best that we can to bear on facilities like this on behalf of the community. So Dave, appreciate your questions, and obviously want to move on to anyone else who has their hand up. So Regina, do we have any other questions?
Okay. I have Chris Savinsky.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep. Hear your line, Chris.
All right, great. Yeah, I just had a couple of follow-up comments to the union representative there. Look, there are several people on the phone that have lived next year to this facility for decades. Your comments show a complete lack of understanding of the fact that Dave illustrated, that this company has been a serial offender of the United States Clean Air Act. They had operated knowingly under conditions that were ineffective in reducing emissions to a safe level for years. So I really would take it back to you. Jobs are great, but the hundreds of trucks a day coming through neighborhoods, pumping, hazardous waste into these incinerators is completely unacceptable. And regardless of whatever you say, you showed a complete lack of ignorance or a lack of understanding and ignorance on the topic by suggesting that, are there other facilities like this that DEC is regulating? The answer is no. Well, Norlite's like the only one in New York State. So I digress. That's all I had to say, and I'm really sorry that you've been captured by Norlite in this regard for ostensibly the economic gain of your union members. I respect union members. I've been one myself, but that went over the line for me, and that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much for your comments, Chris. And with regard to the number of trucks at the facility, I'm looking into that with our colleagues right now, just to make sure we provide an accurate perspective on that. I believe Ms. Enk could ask a question in that regard, which we'll look to put up on our FAQ site in the future as well. So appreciate your comments. Regina, do we have anyone else with their hand raised that would like to ask a question?
Yep. We have Diana.
Great. Hi, Diana.
Happy here.
My question just has to do with the environmental samples, the soil and surface water samples that were taken and evaluated. Do you have the results back?
Oh, sorry, I was muted there for a second. The results are coming back. They're being validated, QA/QC'd, and we are in the process of evaluating them, and we'll be putting together a report on what we found, and obviously look forward to sharing that with the community in the future.
Thanks. Do you have a date, an anticipated date?
Well, we're obviously working quickly to get that all compiled and get everything validated. Some of these samples do take time. I don't want to put a specific time commitment on it yet because we need to let the scientific process play out and obviously put together a good report that we can share with you. But we do anticipate doing that relatively soon.
Will they be shared before the permits are signed? Before the permits are renewed?
Yes, I think, we're well within, the permit renewal process currently. Obviously, the ball is in the facilities court to return to us a timely renewal that addresses the notice of incomplete application that we had sent to them previously. But before any permits are finalized, we expect and anticipate this data to be out, and obviously we'll share it in a future conversation here with you.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dana. And Regina, do we have any other questions?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. There's some hands that are still up from before, and that they didn't take their hands down, but I haven't seen any new hands come up. And if there's anybody on the calls that, actually, sorry. I do have a new hand. Okay, one moment. The caller with it's showing with zeros. I can't see your number. Caller, are you there?
Hello. Hello.
Yep. Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay. Question for you: has anybody checked the product that comes out of those kilns for pollution? Has DEC checked the shale, the finished product that's coming out of there for pollution? I can't believe that that clay could go through those high temperatures and not create any pollution into the final product. Has anybody checked that? Can you hear me?
We can. Saul, Tony, or Ben, are you in a position to answer that question, or should we get back to this caller with one of our other experts in the future?
Because that would be awful if that's polluted. If there's any inkling of that being polluted, that's awful. Because those trucks are taking that material out and spreading it all over the country. You realize that?
Very much so. That's why we're looking for the right person to be able to answer your question and address that. Ben, can you speak to it at all?
Yeah, I got one.
Okay.
I can answer part of that question. The other answer will come from another division, either materials management or RECRA division. But one thing we have looked into is part of the dust operation that goes into the final product. That is sampled. We do sample that for metals. It's looked at on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis. So there's part of it that has to do with some of the things I look at that is sampled on a quite regular basis. What's the shell that's coming out the end of the kiln from the firing end, if that's sampled, that's going to be either the Division of Materials Management or RECRA that would look at that.
That's definitely got to be checked. I mean, I went over to People's Island hiking over there, and what do I see on the trails but this aggregate? Now, if it's over there, where else is it being spread? If that's polluted, that's awful. And I got one more question.
Sure, but just to speak to that, sir, one of the future presentations we have, we'll bring some of our other experts on that oversee that side of it and continue the conversation too. But go ahead and ask your next question.
Okay, I got one more question. wasn't it years ago that Norlite pumped the water out of that lake into the river?
Saum, do you want to take that? I think you talked about that.
You're not aware of that?
The quarry is dewatered, as I mentioned in the presentation, and that dewatering activity then discharges the stormwater through a permitted Speedy's outfall. So that activity has been reviewed by the Division of Water.
Wasn't it years ago that water was pumped into the river?
I would have to defer to Division of Water for where the location of the Speedy's outfalls are. Tony mentioned one of the Speedy's outfalls earlier when he discussed that. As far as I know, the outfalls have been to the salt kill, which eventually does discharge to the river.
That's correct.
Sir, I think your question
now,
is good.
My question is,
I want to get the water folks on in the future.
The question is to you, why is DEC letting Norlite pump that water out when it's all full of silt into that creek?
Well, like we said, sir, we want to get some of our water experts on here to talk specifically about our oversight of the water discharges from this facility. I think we've got a couple questions, obviously, tonight on that. And one of the next presentations that we give coming up soon will involve our water experts on that. And I do know that there are limits on sediment and very specific stringent criteria on these permits that we're talking about as well. So we'll have our water folks go into that in one of the future conversations. So appreciate you asking those, and we'll make sure next go around we talk a little bit more about water. So Regina, you did remind me of an important thing to do, and that is for those of the folks who have dialed into this phone only, if you want to ask a question and you're on the phone, please hit *3 to raise your hand, and we will unmute your lines. Regina, do we have anybody?
No new callers yet. We do have Mike Ewa.
Great.
Oh. Hey, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Oh, hold on. Sorry.
Oh.
There you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, hi. There are a lot of questions in the chat. I don't know if you ever intended to answer them here tonight, but I know I asked 8 of them. I numbered them to make it easy. And Judith mentioned submitting questions in advance as well. I'm sure others also did. Will they be answered tonight? Do we need to read our questions that were in the chat for you to answer them? And if there's any way you could answer what you can answer now, and make sure to let us know when you'll get back to us in writing in those that you can't answer now. I appreciate that.
Sure. I think, Mike, obviously we're trying to follow along the chat as best as we can. And again, we tried to structure some of the presentations tonight to address those questions in advance that folks sent in. Those in which we didn't get to, we are keeping track of them, and we'll be continuing to update our FAQ list on the site to provide some of those answers. If there's, 1 or 2 that you wanted to ask now specifically that we didn't get to, happy to hear you out and answer them.
Okay. Well, let me just start with the first few, which might be more answerable. So by what authority does DEC have the power to allow Norlite to continue operating with expired permits? My understanding is that a lot of their permits expire at the end of this month, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but that DEC plans to let them continue operating until their new permits are issued, if they are ever issued.
Sure. So the State Administrative Procedures Act guides the permitting process for New York State in general. There are provisions in that allow for current permits to continue after their expiration date if a facility has submitted a timely and complete application. But Tony, do you want to speak a little bit more specifically to that?
Well, you kind of covered it. So I believe it's Section 402 of the State Administrative Procedures Act, and so long as the renewal application is timely and sufficient, as a matter of law, the permit will be continued until final decision or court order. So we've put the facility on notice of certain requirements in our notice of incomplete application, and we would expect that the requirements will be submitted before the end of this calendar year. So to answer your question, the authority is the State Administrative Procedures Act.
Okay, and is you're saying this indicating that DEC intends to allow them to continue operating, and why given their extensive history of violations, why would DCE make the decision to allow them to continue operating without, with expired permits?
Tony, you want to take that one on?
Well, yeah, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We put the facility on notice of certain requirements that will need to be met before the end of the year. So it would be incorrect to say that any particular decisions, one way or the other, have been made.
Thanks. Mike, I know you got some other questions here. Is there any other one you want to ask in particular?
Yeah, let me just ask one more. So my understanding is that the new applications will be reviewed as if they're a new facility. If you can explain what aspects of applying as a new facility are stricter than if they were to just apply for renewal of their existing permits.
Sure. So we didn't say it's a new facility. We said it would be new permits. So what we mean by that is, of course, that we're going to be requiring, as we've previously explained, expanded public participation requirements as part of the environmental justice process, as well as a closer look at the operations that are relevant to the two permits that are under review. So it really gives the DEC an ability, not to just simply rubber stamp the renewal, but to take a fresh look at the operations that are relevant to the permits at issue, and to ensure that the public is heard, that questions are answered, and at a level that is substantive and significant. So that's what we mean by new permit application.
Okay, so if I'm interpreting your answer right now correctly, you're saying this not being reviewed as if it's a new facility, and my understanding is that if it were a new facility, those would be stricter requirements than what you'll be applying?
We don't have the legal ability to consider an existing facility a new facility.
Okay, but if you can answer the question of if it were a new facility, would the requirements be stricter than what they'll be going through in this new permit process?
Yeah, DEC regulations have robust requirements for the siting of new industrial hazardous waste incinerators, which would apply in the event that if some other applicant were to propose the construction of a new industrial hazardous waste facility. Those requirements involve a board that would be constituted to review the application and make a determination, and there are some unique siting criteria that would apply.
Well, Mike, suffice it to say that I think, as you've seen from our approach here overall over the last few months, that we are taking a fresh look at things and obviously making sure that we're bringing the utmost stringency to our review or oversight of facilities like this. So we're always seeking to, make improvements in that, and that's what you've seen through our enforcement history, and that's the commitment that we've made to the community overall. And obviously, with a facility that has been in existence for as long as this facility has and changed over time, we continue to change and evolve with it as well to make sure our oversight is matching that too. So really appreciate your questions. Obviously, some of those that we didn't get to, I know our experts will be planning to follow up with you via email to get those addressed as well.
Okay, thank you.
And Regina, do we have any other questions?
So, I'm not seeing any new hands raised. There's hands that were raised from before that haven't put theirs down and re-raised them.
Okay, we'll do one last go around here on the phones. Anyone who's dialed in, if you'd like to ask one last question, hit *3 to raise your hand, please. All right, and last call for anyone else.
I have one that just came in.
Okay.
Hello?
Oh,
yes.
Hi.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you. Hello? Sir, are you there?
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello? Hello?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Can you tell me how many hours or how many days the kilns are running without making product?
Ben, do you want to address that one?
Yep. Sorry, I just had to unmute everything. The kilns, depending on if they're down or not, the kilns could run 24 hours a day. I mean, they do have maintenance and they have issues where a pump may break or a clinker ball may get stuck in something and they have to do maintenance and they get shut down for that. But it's possible they could each run 24 hours a day. Do they? No, but it's possible.
How many hours, when that's running, how many hours are you making product?
If the kiln is running and turning, there's shell being fed to it.
Are they making product 24 hours? I understand that they could only make it to a certain time. There's a limit to when they could grind that material? Or can they grind that all night?
Yeah, they can, no, I don't know about grinding it all night, but they have a stockpile of material that could be ground in the hopper or in the silo that feeds the shale to the system. So that they could have that all done prior and still be processing.
I thought they could only work on that till a certain day, certain time of the day.
Mine processing is exactly what Sam brought up earlier. So there's certain hours where certain aspects of their facility can operate.
And so these are obviously all good questions, some of which are also best directed to the facility. And, you know, we've obviously heard the comments that are taking it back about whether or not we have the facility on one of our sessions that we do, but we do know that they are planning their own engagement and outreach events. So obviously encourage you to stay tuned for any announcements in the facility, and you can ask.
I have one question.
Sure.
Is DEC giving permits out for mining, or are they giving permits out for hazardous waste burning?
The two permits that are up currently are the Air Title V permit, which regards the air emissions from the incineration process, and also the RCRA hazardous waste permit, which we spoke about last meeting. So those are the two permits that are currently open.
In other words, you're giving them an incineration permit?
Correct. Their air permit is up for renewal this year, along with their hazardous waste permit. So those are the two that we were speaking about tonight, and Tony spoke about the process on.
The state is allowing hazardous waste incineration. Is that what you're saying?
We have a facility that has a permit with which to burn hazardous waste as part of their industrial process. And we are engaged in a public process with you all, should we get timely renewal applications from the facility, to take a look at those permits. And that's what we're in the middle of. Really appreciate your questions and having you on tonight, sir. I didn't get your name earlier, but obviously appreciate you joining us tonight. Regina, do we have any more questions from the WebEx or phone?
There you go. I'm not seeing any new hands raised. I have some hands that were raised from before that haven't gone down and then back up again.
All right. Well, if there are no new questions. Oh, wait, was there a question that just came in, Regina?
I'm not seeing any new.
All right. Well, folks, we obviously appreciate your time with us tonight. And as we've left the slide up here, you can see the number of experts that DEC has. And these are just a few of them that are overseeing this facility on a regular basis. And we do appreciate your questions and comments. Like we said tonight, a number of those will be addressed on our FAQ site and list that's on there. So please keep checking back to our website. Please do keep emailing the comments.norlite2020@dec.ny.gov. Anytime you do have questions, and any one of our experts will get back to you. If your questions weren't answered tonight directly, like I said, we're going to be updating the FAQ list. We will get back to some of the individual folks who submitted questions to us as well. But again, if you have more and weren't able to ask it, our doors are always open, and we want to continue this conversation. So we're going to be working with Mayor Keeler's office to schedule another meeting coming up here in the future. We want to get a regular cadence of these going to keep this important conversation going. So we really appreciate everyone's time tonight and for joining us. And again, thank you for your interest in DEC and our oversight of this facility. Special thanks to Regina, Sam, Tony, and Ben for their time tonight presenting and sharing information. I think we've taken a lot of information back to guide our future conversations here. But thank you very much for your time tonight, and hope you enjoyed this presentation. So thank you.